All right, so to help us dive a little bit more into this conversation and really understand how all these things work together is Colonel Pat Stich, Colonel Fred Ortiz, and Colonel Mark Geraldi. So thanks, guys, for joining me.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Ashley.
All right, so we're first going to talk about building readiness. So Colonel Stich, when we say readiness and building readiness, what does that mean?
Well, so first off, on behalf of the FORSCOM G3, Ashley, thanks for giving us this opportunity to come together today. The three of us guys work together hand in hand on a daily basis, and even though we have deliberate lines of effort within the G3, we have to work in a synchronized fashion on a daily basis in order to generate this readiness that you're talking about on behalf of the FORSCOM commander. And so thanks for giving us an opportunity to have this dialogue today with you. When you and I were talking earlier today, and I was inquiring about who is the audience that we want to talk to here today, and you said really almost anyone, but principally our soldiers and potentially even subordinate commands within Forces Command. And so the question of readiness for what? Well, really at the end of the day, it becomes readiness to fight and win our nation's wars, and that's what it comes down to. To compete on a daily basis in a competitive global environment, and then should that competition transition to conflict, then we have to be able to prevail in conflict. And so that's the readiness that we're trying to achieve for our Army and for our nation. You also mentioned when we were dialoguing earlier today that you didn't want this to be a briefing, that you wanted to be a discussion between three old colonels in the FORSCOM headquarters responsible for informing readiness for the FORSCOM leadership and for our subordinate units. And so I think that's what we're going to try to drive for you here today. My directorate is the FORSCOM G3 Plans Directorate. You mentioned earlier ReARMM. ReARMM is one of the principal areas that we focus on. ReARMM has gone initially operational capable for our Army as of the 1st of October of this year. So the intent was that it would become the Army's readiness generation model beginning in FY22. And so while we are still developing it as a process, it is our readiness generation model, replacing sustainable readiness as our previous generation model. So to talk about what ReARMM does, ReARMM is simply a mnemonic device that we use that means regionally aligned readiness and modernization model. It allows us to modernize our Army so that we can prevail on a multi-domain operations battlefield in the future, while not degrading the readiness that is required to win in conflict today. And so it does those two things. Additionally, what it does is the ReARMM model helps us to align forces geographically, and I can talk through some of that if you'd like with regard to our geographic force pools, and also functionally with regard to the responsiveness of forces and those forces that need to be on a more responsive posture than others. So really those three things allows us to modernize and allows us to maintain readiness required to prevail today while we conduct that modernization, and allows us to align regionally and functionally. And that's really what the ReARMM model does in order to generate readiness for us. Now, how is the ReARMM model broken down? It's really fairly simple. It breaks down into three distinct cycles, if you will, and we call this the unit life cycle. So each unit in the Army will have a unit life cycle. Those three cycles are modernization, training, and mission. All right, and mission can look like a number of different things. Right now, the cycle is an 8-month cycle. So 8 months of modernization, 8 months of training, and 8 months of mission cycle. And then that cycle begins over again. Now, there are some variations to that 3-unit cycle, life cycle, or we call what we call a mission line. So what I just described would be a 3-unit mission line, so that some units may have 2 mission cycles in a row. For example, they may go from prepare to deploy to a deployed mission. So that would be a modernization, training, mission. But it's all some variation of those 3 cycles of the unit life cycle.
No, sir, I had heard in first talks about ReARMM that one of the goals was to provide a little bit more predictability for units. And is that what ReARMM is doing with what you're talking about?
Yeah, 100%. We're getting great feedback from the force on that. So, and I'm sure that Mark will talk about this a little bit if it gets into the Army synchronization and scheduling conference that we do, the ASRC, that's done twice a year. But we're at the point now where we're looking out 6 years and getting this cycle built in. Units have got once that cycle gets built from force providers, then units start to populate that with where they are within each of those cycles, and so we're really able to drive predictability a lot further out than we've historically seen.
So, I mean, really, we're talking about, readiness, but we're also, people too. It all comes back to people, and being able to provide that predictability is huge for soldiers and families and units.
People being the Chief of Staff of the Army's number one priority, giving that predictability is key.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that we consistently hear from soldiers and Army families is, predictability is the one thing that we'd really like to have in life. In our service, and so we believe this model is going to really improve that for soldiers and Army families.
Okay, and so you were talking about some of the regionally aligned forces. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so you know that our forces are broken into geographic combatant commands, and we've identified forces that are aligned with those geographic combatant commands, so that they can conduct theater security cooperation associated with the partnered forces within those geographic combatant commands, so that they have interoperability with those geographic combatant commands, and so that they can achieve greater awareness about the geography of those geographic combatant commands.
Makes sense.
Yeah, we also have globally aligned forces, so that we have our most responsive forces that are postured to respond, and have achieved a readiness posture that is advanced, so that they are capable of responding on limited notice.
Okay. And so, Colonel Ortiz, how are we measuring readiness? And I know there are a lot of different ways we do this, but can you simplify it just a little bit?
I think we can do that. So first of all, just to know, I'm the director of the Operations and Readiness Directorate, and I'm actually a chemical officer.
Oh.
And the reason why I bring that up is because USR, the Unit Status Report, I've been involved with that since I was a sergeant, actually. And so when you talk about readiness and how do we measure readiness, that has been around forever. And it comprises of measuring the amount of personnel you have, the authorized personnel you have, the people that are on hand. It involves your equipment, the equipment that's on hand, the serviceability of that equipment, and the last piece is the training part of that. Why is that important? Because everything he was talking about, when you talk modernization, these units can actually predict that during that time frame when they're doing modernization, they are not going to be up to par. It's like a zero-sum defects, if you will. If you are doing modernization, we know that you're not going to be ready to go out tomorrow out the door. So the predictability part
that's interesting.
That they were talking about helps us in knowing that some of these units are going to be not necessarily out of commission because there's some training that can happen while they don't have their equipment.
Sure.
But it is not what is expected of those units. They can fill out some other mission requirements for smaller elements.
Well, and maybe I'm completely wrong in this, but we're talking about modernization, and to me that is fielding new equipment. And so for fielding new equipment, that's still training. We're still learning to use that new equipment.
Yes and no.
Okay.
Because when you're learning, you'll go through a phase where you're learning how to do that. You're not really training. When I talk training with the squad.
Okay.
Because that's what we're looking for, the squad to be ready to go and perform their mission.
Okay.
It's not necessarily about the individual. The individual can go to schools and everything else throughout any of the phases that Pat brought out. But the squad itself, or the unit that's going to be training, that's where we concentrate on the training. That's what we want to know, that it's ready to go and do their mission.
Okay.
So part of this, when we talk about this, is we really want to know is, do you have all the people you need to have?
Sure.
And while we're during the modernization phase, we may not have everybody there because they're going to school, we're doing other stuff. Maybe they're helping with the transition of the equipment while we're turning in equipment and getting new equipment in. As we go through the training phase, we should have a good percentage of that unit up and working through the different different phases of getting
Okay.
ready for their mission, their next step, which is the mission. And during the mission, obviously, you got to be ready to go
Sure.
anytime you need to. There'll be units that will go out on a mission. There'll be units that'll be ready to go on a mission. They'll be standing by for orders to go out. All this is important, in my mind, for all squad leaders and all platoon sergeants to know this information. What is it that we're looking for? And I know most of them don't pay attention because it's the staffs that do this, that provide this report, but we're based it on the people on the ground doing the right thing, making sure they order the parts at the right time. They're doing their PMCs
Right.
on their vehicles so that we can order the right parts and have them for them, and then ensure that those vehicles are up to par before they're ready to go out.
You know, I think it's enlightening to talk to you guys just because, you know, you think, again, maybe I'm just thinking about it really basically, but you think readiness and you think, oh, I got to get my people ready, but you don't necessarily think about, well, the equipment needs to be ready too, and all of the other things that really encompass readiness.
Absolutely. So there are other things that happen with soldiers. Their personnel health readiness
Sure.
assessment. That's a yearly thing that we don't think about. Going to the eye doctor, going to the dentist.
Yeah.
You need to get those things done. So why am I talking this way? Because I think the platoon sergeants, the squad leaders, they need to take care of this task. Yes, it may not be something that's important all the time, but I know when I was growing up, I used to carry a book on each one of my soldiers that had all that stuff. So I think that's important.
That is important.
Something to go back to basics, if you will. I think starting the new model, we say new, but we've been working at this stuff for two years, I think so. But since it's coming out to the field, it's going back to those basics. I think you heard Sergeant Major of the Army speak about this. Go back to the basics. Know everything about your soldiers. Well, that's what it involves. When was the last time you went to your eye doctor?
Too
it's
long
been a year.
ago.
You need to go back. And that's part of this, because
Yeah.
when we do the checks to make sure you're ready to go, that's one of those checks that said, have you been to the eye doctor every year? So I'm kind of talking really basic, but I think it's important that we talk about the basics in order to talk about
absolutely.
readiness. Because when we're getting ready to go out the door, you don't want to be stopped because your teeth are crooked.
Yeah.
Actually, they're hurting. They're not. It doesn't matter if they're crooked.
Or you need a fill-in or something
Correct.
crazy.
Correct.
So I'm gonna. You said something and it triggered this question, but what has the feedback been from commanders on ReARM? Have you? I mean, are they? I know it's still relatively new, but is this something that they are excited about?
Yeah, so I think anything that increases the predictability for units and for soldiers and their families, people are going to be excited about it.
Yeah.
The proof comes in the pudding, though, right? And so this is it's a nascent model right now. It's only been operational for what a quarter, just over a quarter now. And although, like Fred said, it's been in development for several years since it's a response to the 2018 National Defense Strategy. So it has been in development for quite some time. But I think that commanders are starting to see the proof in the pudding of ReARM and its effectiveness as a readiness model.
You know, when you say 2018, I feel like it shouldn't be so long ago. But gosh, that was, what, 4 years ago now?
Yeah.
What's a long time ago?
Well, but when you also talk about this, you got to talk about the technology and how fast it's moving. You know, when you talk about technology and how fast it moves, sometimes our modernization projects, by the time they get out to the force, they're old. And I think that some of the stuff that we're doing is trying to catch up with that part.
Yeah.
It's something that we see at this level is when you actually look at all this stuff and you go, you have the time to see a bigger picture.
Yeah.
You know, as part of like the readiness piece. It's not necessarily to go on a mission, but there are times when they go to a training event that, you know, we have to set up.
Yeah.
Those also have to be measured, so.
I'll say I'm an Army spouse, and just the idea of my husband being able to say, this is when I'm going to do this and this is when I'm going to do that, that is appealing. You know, I mean, we're always trying to plan something, and to have that predictability is nice.
Yeah.
So I'm going to move on to Colonel Geraldi. So what do you think everyone should understand about FORSCOM training and readiness?
Great question. Before I dive into it, just a couple things. First, just a touch about me. I'm the Forces Command Director of Training, so that's my bailiwick. And a couple comments on what my colleagues said. So first off, to Colonel Pat Stich, I will explicitly not talk about the Army Synchronization and Resourcing Conference, because this is not, I don't think this is meant to be like a sleep aid podcast
No.
to put people to sleep, because that'd be the quickest way to put somebody to sleep, is to talk about a
Find out in
conference.
March.
That's right. And then to touch on what Colonel Fred Ortiz was mentioning, you know, he covers all readiness. What I'm going to talk about here, being that I'm the Director of Training, is to kind of hyper-focus on training readiness.
Okay.
So in your question, you talked about what everyone should understand. So I just want to be clear on what I'm talking about, the everyone here. The everyone here for me, it's staff sergeants and below, down to soldier level. And the reason being is, you'll hear some pretty high-speed concepts, big concepts that we talked, my colleagues just spoke about. But none of this works unless our staff sergeants, our squad leaders, our team leaders, down to our individual soldiers, understand how
Absolutely.
they fit into this whole concept.
Yeah.
So it's no secret that our Army exists for one purpose and one purpose only. That is to fight and win our nation's wars, period. That's why we're here. So FORSCOM's role in that is to produce those units that are highly trained and disciplined to actually do that fighting and be victorious on the battlefield. So our training strategy, it's what enables, again, at the lowest level, our soldiers, our team leaders, our squad leaders, to do just that on the battlefield. So readiness, starting at its lowest level, that's what enables us to win.
And so when you talk about the foundational training approach, what do you mean by that?
So first, and I like to use a lot of metaphors, so hopefully I don't lose folks in it, but it's its simplest kind of terminology. It's crawl, walk, run methodology. We're not going to go straight to a sprint or straight to a speed walk. You're gonna do that crawl phase first before you progress. As the name implies, foundational. It's just like building a building. You start at the foundation, which is at that individual soldier level, and then you move up to that crew level or team level, and then you move up to your squad and so on before you move on. So our strategy is very much focused at the company level and below, focusing on the fundamentals. So, for football folks out there, we just had the college championship, blocking and tackling.
Were you happy with the outcome?
I was. It was a great game, by the way, too. So I think everyone enjoyed the game. Some more happy than others.
You just lost half of the population in this podcast.
Sorry.
But not the true football fans who just love the game. So that's a good diversion there. But yeah, so focusing on those fundamentals at the company level and below. So how do we do this? Is it magic? No. So by focusing at those lower echelons, that allows you to kind of apply more resources. So the most basic resource is time. And Fred and Pat talked about predictability and carving out the time to do that. But then there's other things too, tangible things, tangible resources, ammo. We like to shoot things and blow things up. That's part of our mission of how we fight and win on the battlefield. So more resources will be devoted, ammo to at those lower echelons, those lower levels. Fuel. You got to drive your tanks or your fighting vehicles or whatever, your trucks. So all those resources will be focused more at those lower echelons. So what that does is it allows those lower levels to get more repetitions in, and then sets of repetitions. So just think to the gym. We all go to the gym. It's your sets and reps, and those are focused at your lower levels, company and below. So they keep doing, keep firing their weapons, keep maneuvering their teams, et cetera, until they get better and better, again, those blocking and tackling tasks. And that's that solid foundation. Once that foundation's built, you move up to the next and so on. And
so it kind of sounds like what you're saying is, and the CG talks about this all the time, mastering the fundamentals.
Yes.
And so, why is that so important? We're doing the foundational, but why do we need to master it?
Right. Great question. Soldier in small units, you've got to be, each unit, each soldier has a specific task, specific mission on the battlefield, and that's what we're relying on as a combined force to get the mission done. So you've got to first master your individual skills, your own individual weapon. That's everybody across the board. If you're assigned a vehicle, how to operate and maintain that vehicle. And then whatever your specialty is. If you're a tank, you better be able to shoot the tank. If you're a chemical environment specialist, like Fred was talking about, you better be able to know how to use detection equipment and decontamination equipment, et cetera. So if you don't have those fundamentals, you're not providing us, one, you're not taking care of yourself, your basic shoot, move, and communicate. How do I
Sure.
survive and talk on the battlefield? And then you're not providing that capability that we need to fight and win on the battlefield.
Okay.
Can I bring
Yeah,
up
yeah,
something to your
absolutely.
point? And I think something that, talking about the football piece and everything else, I started thinking, I coach kids when I was younger. Anyways, it brings it back to that point. How do you build a team? And you can't build a team unless each individual on the team knows their job.
Sure.
And so I think that that's part of the foundational piece, is to know our individual pieces, so that when the coach comes on board, that brigade commander, division commander, corps commander, FORSCOM commander, those pieces come together to complete the mission.
But would you say too, it builds trust within your team too.
Oh,
If you can look to the person next to you and know that they know how to do their job, that only helps with your unit cohesion and trust within unit.
So within my directorate, we also do. People are going to love this. We do the emergency deployment readiness exercise, or the EDRES.
You're the
yes,
guy.
You're
I'm
that
the
guy.
You're that guy.
I'm the responsible guy. So for everybody out there, it's me. No, it's my team. It's not just me. My team. See, this is where the team part comes. No, but it's important to understand that we're not doing this to be a pain in the neck. We're doing to make sure that those NCOs and those officers that are asked to perform certain duties, like anything from the hazardous material certification, that you get hazardous material certification so that you can put the right equipment in the right place in order to deploy, that those individuals did their part so the rest of the unit don't have to look at that part.
Yeah.
The ammunition handler, the movement officer. Everybody has to be a movement officer. I remember being a lieutenant. Hey, you're going to be the UMO. Wait, what does that mean? Well, you got to go to class, and then when we do an EDRI, you get to do this for real. But when you're actually deploying, it's very important. Unfortunately, we tend to choose those sergeants that are squad leaders or platoon sergeants that you're needed somewhere else.
Sure.
And so I think it's important that for all this, in a part of training and a part of all of us in this G3 section, we understand how this works. We've got plenty of experience with this stuff. By not being here at the top, we can try to give up some of this information back to the units, back to the soldiers that are coming on board,
Yeah.
and learning how to do this stuff.
Well, and I think too,
If I could just jump in real quick,
yeah.
sorry to wedge in. So first, just talking about the the emergency deployment program, the EDRI program. It's kind of he's the honest broker for it. And what Pat started off with saying, hey, we've got this fairly newish concept of ReARM, and Pat said, hey, proof's in the pudding. Well, Fred's the guy that he's the honest broker to say, hey, is the pudding, is it straight? Are we trained and ready as we think we are, as units
Yeah.
think they are? And that's kind of one of those key things that ties it all together.
Well, and all I can think about is when you're talking about EDRIs and readiness is the IRF mission. And I mean, you think about the 82nd August, I guess it was,
Yes, ma'am.
deployed within 18 hours
Yes, ma'am.
to Afghanistan. I mean, they couldn't have done that without all of this, being prepared.
Absolutely. And that's what's, I think the neat part about being in this position where we sit at now, we've experienced all this on the other side. And as you come up here, you start using that experience to try to help down to the units and ensure that
Sure.
they understand what we're doing.
Yeah.
One of the things that we're doing in the EDU program is, and I know it's been done in the past, but I'm restarting it again, is put a checklist that allows the unit to understand, hey, look, we just during your ReARM time where you do modernization, you can start looking at this. So when you go to training piece, you can start executing. So when you are in the mission phase and I do an EDRI on your unit, this should be second nature.
Right. And you had said something too, now that we're at the top, we can share some of the knowledge. But I think it's also important that when you're down at the lower level, you want to know that this isn't just the higher ups telling you to do something for no good reason. I mean, we've all been in the position where our higher headquarters has asked us for something and we're like, oh, geez, but there's actually a reason for it.
Well, and that experience, again, I don't know. I mean, I've got almost 34 years in service, so
Old man.
I think our
I
experience
won't tell you how
alone
old I
is-
am.
Say again?
I won't tell you how old I am.
Well, we don't have to go there either. However, but the only reason for bringing that up is it tells you that we've been through many of these
Sure.
experiences.
Sure.
Whether it was deployment, exercises, EDRES, it doesn't matter what you call it. It's all the same thing. You have to train to be ready to go. And in order to be ready, we just remind you that there are some basic stuff in here that is necessary for your unit, from yourself to the squad, to the platoon, to the company, and so on, so that the team is ready to go when it's called upon.
Sure. And so I know we're running out of time, but I just want a couple more questions. And I think this one probably pertains to everybody. I know we talked about it a little already, Colonel Stich, but what is the relationship between people first, and readiness? Do you want to add anything, Colonel Stich? I know we talked with ReARM and predictability.
I could jump.
You can go.
Well, go ahead, Mark.
Okay. And Pat already talked a little bit about, the predictability,
Right.
and you tied into that being a military spouse, the predictability that ReARM provides. That's certainly a part of people first. The end I want to focus on is that trained and ready, to me, I know to RCG as well, General Garrett, that is people first at its most fundamental level. And that's why we're focusing at the company level and below, because that's the point of contact. That's when we're, if and when we get called to fight our nation's war, at that initial point of contact with the enemy, these are our soldiers, America's sons and daughters. We want them to be fully ready to fight and win. And in this modern era, key thing here is also and survive. We're focusing now more on large-scale combat operations, much more deadly environments, much more lethal environments. So it's so critical. To me, the trained portion of it, the readiness portion of it, is so fundamental to taking care of our people across the board.
I mean, you have to have people to be ready, right? I mean, without people, we don't have an army. So I think it all ties together. So again, I know we don't have forever with you guys. I think we could probably talk about readiness forever. But I want to give you each a chance to just kind of give your bottom line up front on each of your sections, on what we've talked about so far. So Colonel Stich, I'll go with you first.
Okay, great, thanks. Well, number one, I appreciate the opportunity to speak about the team that I have the privilege of being on. We've got, I think each of us have got a robust team of true professionals, many who are retired or served in uniform, and who choose to continue to serve as Department of Army civilians or even contractors, and they take this business very seriously because they know that even here in the big building, building that has a recording studio, that the things that they do on a daily basis impact the soldier that's on the ground and that soldier's family. And so we may talk about a unit life cycle that has 3 models that are very broad brush, but every time one of these our team members puts a pen to paper to make an adjustment of that, they do that with the knowledge of what that impact has on a soldier and their family.
I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Colonel Ortiz?
Along with our team members, not only the Department of the Army Civilian Contractors, we also have members from the National Guard and the Reserves that are very important to our teams. This is not all done with regular Army soldiers. The Reserves and the National Guard bring incredible amount of information to the teams, whether it is in the readiness piece, whether it's in the EDRES, whether it is deploying. I handle the deployments of all the units getting out. So the equipment, when it's going out, you tell me I need an aircraft to fly out, and I tell you, no, it's got to go by boat. Yeah, my team is the one doing that. So there are a lot of folks in my office that, as Pat brought up, they have a lot of experience, a lot of expertise that can provide us with some great tools to help us, some cheat sheets, if you will, to help us get to where we need to go. But the work still has to be done, and that work is done by the soldiers. And so my appreciation is not lost in the fact that even though we can tell them everything we know, the soldier still has to learn it and do it.
Sure.
It's very important. So I do appreciate the opportunity to speak and to be able to be with 2 colonels down here up here talking about this, but I think it's important, and I appreciate that opportunity.
Agreed. All right,
So,
Colonel Geraldi.
Yeah, I'll pick up on the soldier theme that Fred was talking about. So I just really want to emphasize, if you're a squad leader, maneuvering your squad, if you're a tank or Bradley commander, crew chief, or if you're an individual soldier qualifying your weapon, you all have an individual role in making this whole thing go and making sure that we are trained and ready to fight and win our nation's war.
All right. Well, and like I said, I think we could probably go on and on about this. I don't think we even scratched the surface, to be completely honest. But I know that you guys are all very busy. And so I really appreciate you taking the time to have this short conversation. And maybe in the future we can talk a little bit longer.
All right. Thanks.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks.